Charles Leclerc won the British Grand Prix for the first time in his life. He ended a 624-day drought. He handed Ferrari its 250th win in Formula One. And then, standing a few feet away in the press conference, the man who finished third suggested the setup that won the race was his idea. Lewis Hamilton said Leclerc had come around to his direction, his philosophy, that the way he had pushed Ferrari to build the car was the way that just took the win at Silverstone. Leclerc heard it, and the data from Friday night says something even stranger. Here is the line that lit the fuse. In the Silverstone press conference, on the podium's own stage, Lewis Hamilton said of Leclerc, he migrated that way, meaning his teammate had abandoned his own setup route and drifted toward the direction Hamilton had been fighting for all weekend. Hamilton went further. He said his philosophy and the direction he was taking was ultimately the right one. Read that in plain terms. The driver who finished third just told the world that the driver who won only won after copying him. And the twist is that Ferrari's own telemetry from the day before does not exactly prove him wrong. Let me set the scene, because the timing of this matters. This was round 9 of the 2026 season. Silverstone, a home race for Hamilton, a Ferrari 1 machine underneath him, and a British crowd that came to watch him win. He did not win. He qualified third, picked up a 5-second penalty for jumping the start, ran as high as second, then lost that place to George Russell when Ferrari pitted him under a late safety car and Mercedes left Russell out. Third at the flag. Then a separate yellow flag investigation that nearly cost him the podium entirely before the stewards let it go with a reprimand. So Hamilton had every reason to be quiet. He had every reason to talk about his own bruised afternoon. Instead, he spent his time on the podium stage explaining why the man next to him had won. That is not normal. Drivers who finish third do not usually walk into the press room and hand out a tutorial on their teammate's victory. The paddock did not see it coming. And the more Hamilton talked, the clearer it became that this was not a throwaway comment. This was Hamilton planting a flag. Understand why Hamilton was in the mood he was in, because his race had come apart in slow motion. He jumped the start and got handed a 5-second penalty before the first stop. He clawed his way up to second anyway. Then, near the end, Max Verstappen crashed his Red Bull at Stowe and brought out the safety car that would decide everything. Ferrari pitted Hamilton for fresh tyres. Mercedes gambled and left Russell out. When the dust settled, Russell had the place and Hamilton had third. Then the stewards opened a yellow flag investigation that could have thrown him off the podium completely, before letting him off with a reprimand. Penalised once, investigated twice, outraced by his own teammate, and standing on the third step of his home podium. That is the man who walked into the press room and started explaining why Leclerc won. It tells you how badly he wanted that point on the record. What Hamilton described was a fork in the road that happened on Friday. Ferrari's simulator, the tool the team uses to predict where a car should be set up before it ever turns a wheel, was pointing the drivers toward one direction. A specific balance. A specific way of trimming the car. Hamilton looked at what the simulator wanted and decided he did not trust it. He and his engineers stayed on the path they already believed in. The direction Hamilton had been pushing Ferrari toward for months. Leclerc, by Hamilton's account, started somewhere else. He began the weekend closer to what the simulator was asking for. Two teammates, same car, splitting in two different directions before a wheel had been turned in anger. That is the setup fork. And by Sunday, only one of them was holding a trophy. The question Hamilton put into the air, without ever saying it this bluntly, was simple. Whose direction actually won this race? And the calendar made that Friday fork even sharper. Silverstone was a sprint weekend, which strips the drivers down to a single hour of practice before everything starts counting. Less track time means less room to experiment, less chance to slowly walk a setup toward the sweet spot. On a normal weekend, two teammates drifting toward the same balance could be written off as both of them finding the obvious answer over 3 long practice sessions. On a sprint weekend, there is barely time for that. The convergence happened fast, under pressure, with the clock against both cars, which makes it much harder to call a coincidence. When you have 1 hour to find a direction and one driver ends up on the others, somebody moved on purpose. This is where the story stops being a press conference quote and starts being a data problem. Because Hamilton's claim is checkable. Setup direction leaves fingerprints. Every lap a Formula One car runs, it bleeds telemetry. Throttle traces, brake pressure, steering angle, the exact shape of how a car rotates through a corner. If Leclerc really did migrate toward Hamilton's balance across the weekend, the traces would show it. His corner signatures would start to look more like Hamilton's and less like his own Friday baseline. And that is exactly the thread that independent telemetry analysis started pulling. But before we get to what the data showed, understand what migrating a setup even means at this level, because it is not a small thing. A Formula One setup is not one dial. It is dozens of them, all fighting each other. Wing levels, differential settings, how the car is sprung, how it transfers weight, how it manages its tires over a stint. Move one and you move 5 others. A driver's setup direction is really his whole theory of how to make the car fast. For a driver to abandon his own theory mid-weekend and adopt his teammates is close to an admission. It says, "Your way is quicker than mine." Drivers almost never say that out loud, which is why Hamilton saying it for Leclerc landed the way it did. And it raises the stake that runs under this entire story. Because if Hamilton is right, if his fingerprints really are on Leclerc's winning car, then the most important upgrade Ferrari found at Silverstone was not a new part, it was a driver. It was Hamilton dragging the whole team toward his way of working, and the first trophy of that shift going to the other side of the garage. That would explain why Hamilton, third and penalised and furious, still walked in and claimed it. He was not talking about one race, he was talking about who is steering Ferrari now. And there is a season of history behind that flag. Since Hamilton arrived at Ferrari, the car has been quietly bending toward him. After Leclerc crashed in Monaco, he switched to the same brake material Hamilton had favoured from the start of the year. Ferrari moved the front suspension of the car closer to Hamilton's preferences for the 2026 design. Behind the scenes, Hamilton has pushed hard on how the team sets the car up and how it runs its weekends. None of that is a secret inside the garage. So when Hamilton stood up at Silverstone and said the winning direction was his, the engineers in that room already knew the shape of the argument. The car Leclerc won in was, in a dozen small ways, a car that had been drifting toward Hamilton's taste for months. Silverstone was not the first time Leclerc ended up on Hamilton's side of a technical fork. It was just the first time it delivered a trophy, and the first time Hamilton said it out loud. Here is the detail almost everyone missed in the noise. The telemetry did not stay still across the Silverstone weekend. Between the sprint session and Sunday qualifying, Leclerc's data traces started shifting. His corner entries, his rotation, the way his car was behaving through the medium and high-speed sections, all of it began drifting. And the direction it drifted was toward Hamilton's numbers. Not away. Toward. The two Ferrari drivers started the weekend with different signatures and ended it closer together, with Leclerc doing most of the moving. That is the part that turns Hamilton's press conference line from a boast into something with teeth. Because a driver can say anything on a stage, telemetry cannot pose for the cameras. And the telemetry from Friday night into Saturday shows a Ferrari number 2 car whose fundamental balance was converging on the exact direction Hamilton says he was pushing. Whether Leclerc got there by copying Hamilton or arrived there on his own, he arrived where Hamilton already was. So back to the question Hamilton hung over the whole weekend. Whose direction won at Silverstone? On the raw evidence, on the shape of the data, the honest answer is uncomfortable for the man holding the trophy. The winning car, and Hamilton's car, ended the weekend, speaking the same setup language. And it was Leclerc's car that moved to meet Hamilton's, not the other way around. Hamilton did not invent the claim. He read the same telemetry everyone in that garage can read, and he said the quiet part into a microphone. Now, here is where it gets interesting, because Leclerc did not sit there and nod. Asked about it, he told a different story entirely. Leclerc said he had 2 options going into the weekend. He could try to reproduce what Hamilton was doing, because Hamilton was clearly quick, or he could keep pushing in his own direction and trust himself. Leclerc said he chose the second route, his own. He credited a few things he spotted in the data on Friday night, and described the whole process as intuition mixed with feeling, not, in his telling, a copy of Hamilton's homework. And understand what this win meant to Leclerc, because it explains why he will not hand a piece of it to anyone. His last victory had come at Austin at the United States Grand Prix back in 2024. 624 days without standing on the top step. A 2026 season that had already included a retirement at Monaco and a run of weekends where nothing landed. For a driver who has spent his Ferrari career being told he is the future, that drought was starting to feel like a verdict. Silverstone broke it. His first ever win at the home of British Motorsport, his 9th in Formula One, and Ferrari's 250th in the sport. That is not a win a driver lets his teammate co-sign. Whatever the telemetry says, Leclerc is going to call that one his. So you have 2 Ferrari drivers, 1 car design philosophy, and 2 completely opposite accounts of how the winning setup was found. Hamilton says Leclerc migrated to him. Leclerc says he found his own way there. Both men are describing the same convergence in the data. They just refuse to agree on who did the converging. And that disagreement, sitting in the open, between a winner and the teammate who finished behind him, is the real tension Silverstone left inside Ferrari. There is one more twist, and it is the one that makes Hamilton's whole claim so strange. In the race itself, on Sunday, Hamilton was the one who ended up on the wrong car. He ran a different rear wing and balance package than Leclerc and spent the afternoon fighting heavy understeer, the front of the car refusing to bite. He said all the pace he had on Friday simply vanished. He noticed Leclerc had gone the other way on balance, added wing, and found a car that worked, while Hamilton was stuck with settings that did not. So on the day that mattered for the Grand Prix, it was Hamilton chasing Leclerc's balance, not the reverse. Sit with that for a second, because it is the knot at the center of this. Across the weekend, the data says Leclerc drifted toward Hamilton's direction. On race day, Hamilton was the one who guessed wrong and got left behind. Hamilton's philosophy may have set the direction. Leclerc's driving on Sunday is what actually crossed the line first. Both drivers found a piece of the truth. Neither one has the whole thing, and each of them is holding up his half as the version that counts. If Slipstream Stories keeps digging into the fights that actually decide Ferrari's season, the ones happening inside the garage and not just on track, subscribe, because this is the kind of story that only gets louder from here. Enter Fred Vasseur, the man who runs Ferrari, and who now had two of his drivers publicly disagreeing about whose brain won the race. Vasseur did what team principals do. He reached for the fire extinguisher. He waved the whole thing off, saying there was nothing magic about the weekend, that a car does not find half a second in one afternoon, that it was the sum of small gains all over the car. In other words, no single driver won this on his own setup genius. Please, everyone, stop talking. It was a classic attempt to close a subject that Hamilton had just kicked wide open. But Vasseur's problem is that the standings do not let this cool off. Look at where the two Ferrari drivers actually sit. After Silverstone, Lewis Hamilton is third in the championship on 147 points. Charles Leclerc is fourth on 108. Hamilton is 39 points clear of the man who just beat him at Silverstone. For most of the 2026 season, Hamilton has been the stronger Ferrari driver, the one who scored the team's first win of the year, the one dragging results out of the car. Silverstone was Leclerc's answer. So when Hamilton stands up and says the winning direction was his, he is not just talking about one Sunday. He is reminding everyone, Leclerc included, who has been leading this partnership all year. And when Leclerc insists he found his own way to the win, he is refusing to hand that narrative over. This is two drivers fighting over the story of a single race because they both understand the story of the whole season is riding on it. Above them, the title picture only sharpens the knives. Kimi Antonelli leads the championship on 179 points. George Russell is second on 154. The Mercedes pair are running away at the front while Ferrari's two drivers argue about setup credit. And there is a cruel footnote to the whole afternoon. The race never even got a clean finish. Verstappen's crash meant the leaders crossed the line behind the safety car, with Lando Norris fourth and Isaac Hadjar fifth. Antonelli, who had led much of the day, hit a problem with his car late on, took a track limits penalty and tumbled all the way to 16th. So the championship leader threw away a haul of points on the same day. Ferrari found a win nobody in the paddock fully expected. In the constructors' fight, Mercedes lead on 333. Ferrari sits second on 255. And every point Hamilton and Leclerc take off each other instead of off Mercedes is a point that helps the team they are supposed to be chasing. That is the danger buried in a press conference comment. A set-up disagreement between teammates is harmless when the car is winning everything. It is corrosive when you are second in the championship and running out of races to close a 78-point gap. Hamilton claiming Leclerc's win, Leclerc refusing to give an inch, and Vasseur insisting there is nothing to see. Three versions of one afternoon, and all three men know the season may hinge on which version wins. Because here is what Silverstone really exposed. Two of the best drivers in the world are sharing a car, and they cannot agree on who is making it fast. Hamilton says he set the direction and the data backs a piece of that. Leclerc says he found the win himself, and the trophy backs a piece of that. The telemetry sits in the middle, showing a convergence that both men claim as their own victory. And the only thing everyone actually agrees on is that Ferrari, for one weekend, was quicker than it had any right to be. Whose setup won at Silverstone may never get a clean answer, because both drivers have already decided theirs is the true one. But the bigger question is the one Vasseur is terrified of. In a Ferrari, with two champions and one championship slipping away, whose direction does the team follow next? Because they cannot follow both. That answer is coming, race by race, and it will decide far more than a single British Grand Prix. If you want to see the penalty and the safety car call that cost Hamilton the podium fight that same afternoon, that breakdown is on screen now.